The Silent Accord. The emergency session of the Galactic Senate began with a tremor that ran through the crystalline walls of the ancient assembly hall. Built on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, the structure had stood for 3,000 standard years, witnessing the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Today it might witness the end of everything. Consul Vixara stood at the central podium, her 6 arms folded in the traditional gesture of grave concern among her people, the Zalathi. Her violet skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her anxiety to anyone familiar with her species. Around her, representatives from 217 member worlds gathered in their environmental suits and translation pods, the air thick with a dozen different atmospheric mixtures. 500 years had passed since the last time anyone had spoken the words she was about to utter. 500 years since the treaty had been signed, the treaty that every new species inducted into the Galactic Senate had to acknowledge and accept without question. The treaty that contained only one rule, written in languages living and dead, carved into metal that would outlast stars: do not wake the humans. The Andromedans had learned this lesson first, their empire reduced to scattered colonies in the span of a single rotation. The Void Dancers had been next, their living ships turned to drifting husks in the darkness between galaxies. Each time the pattern was the same. Someone threatened humanity's home. Humanity responded. Then humanity returned to their self-imposed isolation, leaving behind only silence and the terrified whispers of survivors. But now the galaxy faced a threat that made those ancient wars seem like minor disputes. The Krillian Empire had emerged from the void between galactic arms, their bioships consuming entire systems like cosmic locusts. 12 mining colonies had vanished in the last cycle alone, their populations of millions reduced to genetic material for the Krillians' endless hunger for evolution and adaptation. Senator Thurok of the Granite Worlds rose from his seat, his silicon-based form grinding with the sound of stone against stone. His voice emerged from the translator as a deep rumble that matched his massive frame. The Krillians have taken another system. The Bereth colony sent their final transmission 3 days ago. 40 million souls consumed. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Bereth colony had been one of the most heavily defended outposts in the Outer Rim, protected by the combined fleets of 6 different species. If it had fallen so quickly, what hope did the rest of them have? Vixara raised her primary arms for silence, her secondary arms manipulating the holographic display that materialized above the assembly. The image showed the current state of the galaxy, with vast swaths of red indicating Krillian-controlled space. The infection was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. The mathematics are clear, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of terrible certainty. At their current rate of expansion, the Krillians will reach the core worlds within 2 standard years. Our combined fleets have proven ineffective against their adaptation capabilities. Each battle teaches them more about our weapons, our tactics, our weaknesses, then we must evacuate, suggested Ambassador Keela of the Aquatic Federation, her words bubbling through the water-filled communication sphere that surrounded her seat. We can retreat to the far rim, establish new colonies beyond their reach. Vixara's bioluminescent patterns flickered with disagreement. The Krillians are not merely conquerors, Ambassador. They are harvesters. They will follow us wherever we flee, growing stronger with each civilization they consume. Running only delays the inevitable. The Senate erupted into heated debate, voices in 100 languages creating a cacophony that the translators struggled to process. Some called for desperate last stands, others for attempts at negotiation, still others for weapons of such terrible power that they would render entire sectors of space uninhabitable. Through it all, no one spoke the obvious solution. No one dared mention the sleeping giants who lurked in their small corner of the galaxy, hidden behind barriers of dark matter and quantum fields that bent space itself around their worlds. The humans had made it clear 5 centuries ago that they wanted nothing to do with the affairs of other species. They had retreated to their home systems after demonstrating power that defied the known laws of physics, power that made them seem less like a species and more like a force of nature. Finally, Elder Zareth of the Ancient Council rose from her hovering throne. At 700 years old, she was one of the few beings still alive who had witnessed the last human intervention. Her crystalline form had grown clouded with age, but her voice still carried the authority of lived experience. I was there, she said, and the assembly fell silent. I was there when the humans came for the Andromedans, I watched their ships fold space like paper, watched them pluck entire fleets out of existence as if they had never been. I saw them reshape matter at the quantum level, turning the Andromedans' own weapons into flowers that bloomed in the vacuum of space. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the assembly. But I also saw what they became in those moments. Not the curious, friendly explorers who had first ventured into our space. They became something else, something that looked upon us as we might look upon insects. When they retreated, it was not from fear or exhaustion. It was from disgust at what they had been forced to become. Consul Vexara's patterns shifted to deep purple, the color of desperate resolve among her people. Then we face a choice, elders and senators. We can die with our principles intact, or we can risk awakening something we cannot control and hope that humanity's intervention saves more than it destroys. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some argued that the treaty was sacred, that breaking it would make them no better than those who had come before. Others pointed out that extinction rendered all treaties meaningless. Back and forth the arguments went, while on the displays above, the red infection of Krillian space continued its inexorable spread. Senator Thurrock finally asked the question that hung unspoken in the air. How do we even know they still exist? 500 years of silence. Perhaps they destroyed themselves, or ascended to another plane of existence, or simply died out. Vexara touched a control on her podium, and a new image appeared. It showed a section of space that appeared empty at first glance, but careful observation revealed something wrong. Stars that should be visible were missing. Radiation that should be present was absent. It was as if someone had drawn a curtain across that region of space, hiding whatever lay behind. "They are still there," she said quietly. "Our deep space monitors detect massive energy signatures from within their barrier. Energies that spike and fade in patterns that suggest ongoing activity. Whatever they have become in their isolation, they have not been idle." The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had anticipated. By a margin of just 3 votes, the Galactic Senate authorized Consul Vexara to break the 500-year silence and send a message to humanity. The weight of that decision settled upon the assembly like a funeral shroud. Vexara stood at the communication array, her 6 hands moving across controls that had not been used in half a millennium. The message was simple, transmitted on the emergency frequency that the humans had provided before their withdrawal, a frequency that supposedly would reach them no matter where in their sealed space they might be. "To the human collective," she began, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "This is Consul Vexara of the Galactic Senate. We invoke the right of desperate need as outlined in the Treaty of Silent Accord. Our civilization faces extinction from an external threat, designated as the Krillian Empire. We humbly request your intervention. We await your response." The message went out, carried by quantum entanglement to ensure instantaneous delivery. The Senate held its collective breath, waiting for some sign that the message had been received. Minutes passed, then hours. The display showed no change in the barrier that surrounded human space. No ships emerged. No response came. Some senators began to voice their fears that humanity had truly vanished, that they had sent their desperate plea into an empty void. Others worried that the humans had received the message but chosen to ignore it, that the galaxy's fate meant nothing to them anymore. Then, exactly 6 hours after the transmission had been sent, something changed. The barriers around human space flickered just for a moment, like a curtain being pulled aside and quickly closed again. A single point of light emerged from the hidden region, moving at speeds that should have been impossible, crossing distances that should have taken years in mere moments. The object stopped just outside the Senate's defensive perimeter, and the tactical displays struggled to make sense of what they were seeing. It was a ship, but unlike anything in their databases, it seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting and changing as if it were more suggestion than solid matter. A communication channel opened, and a voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, though something about it made every being in the Senate shiver with an instinctive fear they couldn't name. "This is Ambassador Chen of the Human Collective. We have received your message. We are discussing your request. You will have our answer in 72 hours. Until then, do not attempt to contact us again. Do not approach our space. Do not investigate our barriers. The consequences of such actions would be regrettable." The channel closed, and the strange ship remained motionless, hanging in space like a promise or a threat. None could say which. The Senate dissolved into chaos once more, but Vixara remained at her podium staring at the displays. She had broken the universe's one rule, had awakened the sleeping giants. Now all they could do was wait to see what would emerge from that long slumber. The awakening storm. 72 hours passed like centuries for the beings gathered in the Galactic Senate. The human ship remained perfectly still, defying 3 attempts by curious species to scan its composition. Each scan had simply failed, as if the instruments forgot what they were supposed to do when pointed at the vessel. Meanwhile, 3 more systems fell to the Krillian Empire, their bioships growing larger and more numerous with each conquered world. Consul Vixara had not left the command center since the human ambassador's message. Her 6 eyes, each capable of tracking different information streams, monitored developments across the galaxy. The Krillians had begun broadcasting their own messages, promises of evolutionary perfection for those who surrendered willingly, threats of agonizing consumption for those who resisted. On the 3rd day, exactly 72 hours after Ambassador Chen's announcement, something happened that made every proximity alarm in the Senate system scream in unified terror. Space itself began to ripple around the human vessel, waves of distortion spreading outward like rings in a cosmic pond. Then between one heartbeat and the next, where there had been 1 ship, there were now 1,000. They appeared instantaneously, not arriving, but simply existing where they hadn't been before. Each vessel was different, as if humanity had abandoned any concept of standardized design. Some were spherical, others crystalline. Still others seemed to be made entirely of flowing energy contained in geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. Senator Thurok's voice carried across the Senate floor. "By the Stone Fathers, what have we awakened?" Before anyone could respond, every display in the Senate chamber activated simultaneously, showing the same image. Ambassador Chen stood in what appeared to be a vast chamber made of living light. But where 500 years ago humans had looked essentially baseline, almost unremarkable, Chen was something else entirely. She still maintained a humanoid form, but her skin seemed to contain galaxies. Her eyes held depths that suggested infinite recursion, and when she moved, she left brief afterimages that showed different possible versions of herself. Consul Vixara. "Members of the Galactic Senate," Chen began, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions the listeners couldn't fully perceive. "We have deliberated on your request. Before we act, you must understand what you have asked of us." The image shifted, showing scenes from humanity's isolation. Cities that floated in null space powered by captured black holes. Children who played games by creating pocket universes and setting them against each other in elaborate contests. Scholars who studied the nature of reality by unmaking and remaking fundamental forces. 500 years ago, we withdrew not because we feared you, but because we feared ourselves. In our conflicts with the Andromedans and the Void Dancers, we discovered that we had no upper limit to our capability for violence. Each battle taught us new ways to unmake our enemies. Each victory brought us closer to something we did not wish to become. The scenes changed, showing humans meditating in chambers where time flowed in circles, where cause and effect became suggestions rather than laws. In our isolation, we have evolved not just technologically but fundamentally. We have touched the source code of reality itself, learned to read and write in the language that underlies all existence. We are no longer entirely what you would recognize as a species. We are something between what we were and what we might become. Vixara found her voice, though it trembled with awe and terror in equal measure. "Ambassador Chen, we understand the gravity of our request. But the Krillians will destroy everything. They consume not just bodies but entire evolutionary paths, erasing billions of years of development with each conquered world." Chen's expression shifted, and for a moment, something almost like sympathy crossed her features. "We know of the Krillians. We have been watching. They are not what you think they are." Before anyone could ask what that meant, alerts began screaming across the Senate's defense network. A massive Krillian biofleet had emerged from fold space at the edge of the system, 500 ships strong, each one bristling with organic weapons that had been grown from the genetic material of conquered species. The lead Krillian vessel broadcast a message. Its communication formed from the screaming voices of 1,000,000 absorbed consciousnesses. "Galactic Senate, your time of judgment has arrived. We see you have awakened the old ones, but they are merely another species to be harvested, another path to be added to our perfection. Surrender now and your absorption will be swift. The human ships made no aggressive moves, simply rearranging themselves into a pattern that seemed random but felt somehow significant. Ambassador Chen's image continued to address the Senate, apparently unconcerned by the approaching threat. The Krillians are not invaders from another galaxy, she said calmly. They are an experiment that escaped its boundaries 3,000 years ago, an attempt by a long-dead civilization to create the perfect adaptive organism. They succeeded too well. The Krillian fleet opened fire, launching spores the size of small moons toward the Senate world. Each spore contained billions of viral organisms designed to convert all organic and inorganic matter into Krillian biomass. The Senate's defense fleets responded with everything they had, but previous engagements had shown that only about 10% of such spores could be stopped by conventional weapons. The human ships still did not move to intercept. Instead, they began to sing. It was not a sound that traveled through space, for sound cannot exist in vacuum. It was something else, a harmony that existed in the quantum foam itself. A resonance that made reality itself vibrate like a struck bell. The approaching spores simply ceased, not destroyed but unmade, their constituent particles forgetting that they had ever been assembled into anything at all. The Krillian fleet recoiled, their bioship screaming in frequencies that shattered glass on worlds light years away. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something they could not adapt to, could not evolve to counter. How could they adapt to something that attacked the very concept of their existence? Ambassador Chen's image flickered, and suddenly she was standing on the bridge of the lead Krillian vessel, though she also remained in the Senate chamber. The multiplicative nature of her existence sent ripples of wrongness through everyone watching. "You have consumed enough," she said to the Krillian overmind, her voice carrying the weight of judgment. "You have had 3,000 years to explore the gift of endless evolution, and you have chosen only hunger. This ends now." The Krillian overmind, a collective consciousness of trillions of absorbed beings, roared its defiance. It launched everything it had at the human ambassador. Weapons that existed in 17 dimensions. Viruses that rewrote the laws of physics. Psychic attacks that had shattered entire civilizations. Chen did not defend herself. She simply existed harder, her presence becoming so fundamentally real that nothing else could exist in the same space. The attack struck her and became poetry, transformed into harmless expressions of mathematical beauty that dispersed into the cosmic background radiation. One of the human ships, a construct of impossible angles that seemed to be inside out and right side in simultaneously, moved for the first time. It did not accelerate or travel. It simply was where it needed to be. The ship touched the lead Krillian vessel, and the bioship began to change, but it was not being destroyed. Instead, it was being healed. The millions of consciousnesses that had been absorbed and enslaved were being separated, freed, given form again. Across the Krillian fleet, the same transformation began to occur. The empire built on consumption was being undone from within, each stolen life being restored and released. The Krillian overmind shrieked as its composite existence came apart, revealed for what it truly was, not a magnificent collective but a parasite that had forgotten its original purpose. As the last consciousness was freed, all that remained was the original organism, a simple creature no larger than a human hand, floating alone in space. Chen appeared beside it, cradling it gently. "Even monsters deserve mercy," she said, and the creature vanished, sent to a pocket dimension where it could exist without the ability to harm others. The Senate watched in stunned silence as the human fleet began to reshape space itself, gathering the freed consciousnesses and sorting them by species, by world, by time period. Ships that had been bioweapons moments before became vast medical centers, where billions of restored beings were being healed, their memories intact but their trauma being gently treated. Consul Vexara finally found her voice. "How is this possible? The amount of energy required, the computational power necessary to separate and restore so many individual consciousnesses." Ambassador Chen turned to address the Senate directly. "This is what we have become in our isolation. We no longer see energy and matter as separate things. We no longer view consciousness as bound to specific physical forms. We have learned to work with the fundamental nature of existence itself." She paused, and when she continued, Her voice carried a note of profound sadness. But using these abilities in anger, in violence, would make us into something worse than the Krillians. They consumed bodies. We could consume realities. This is why we withdrew. This is why we must withdraw again. Elder Zareth spoke up, her ancient voice cracking with emotion. You're leaving? But you've saved us all. Surely we can coexist, learn from each other. Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked entirely human again. Perhaps someday. But not yet. You still see the universe as a place of separate things, separate beings, separate worlds. We have begun to see it as it truly is. All one thing expressing itself in infinite variety. Until you are ready to see that truth without losing yourselves in it, we must remain apart. The human ships began to fold space around themselves, preparing to return to their isolation. But before they departed, Chen delivered one final message. We leave you with a gift, the knowledge of how to detect and prevent future Krillian-type infections. The restored beings will be returned to their worlds, or new worlds if their original homes are gone, and we place a shield around this galaxy, one that will prevent external threats from entering for the next 1,000 years. Use this time wisely. Grow not just in power, but in wisdom. Vexara stepped forward, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors of gratitude and farewell. Will you be watching? Chen's form began to fade as the human ships disappeared one by one. We are always watching, Consul. We are the silence between your words, the dark between your stars, the pause between your heartbeats. We are humanity, and we choose to sleep until we are needed again. Do not wake us lightly. The last human ship vanished, taking with it the impossible song that had filled space with its harmony. The Senate stood in silence, processing what they had witnessed. The galaxy was saved, but the cost was a renewed understanding of their own limitations, and a humbling recognition that humanity had evolved beyond anything they could comprehend. Consul Vexara looked at the empty space where the human fleet had been, then at the billions of beings being transported back to their homes, freed from the Krillian collective. She thought about Chen's words about seeing the universe as one thing expressing itself in infinite variety. Perhaps in 1,000 years, when the shield fell and new challenges arose, they would be ready to understand what humanity had become. Perhaps they would have evolved not just technologically but spiritually, learning to see beyond the illusion of separation that defined their current existence. But for now, the universe had its rule again, unchanged despite everything that had happened. Do not wake the humans. Only now everyone understood that the rule existed not to protect them from humanity, but to protect humanity from what it might become if forced to act. The Senate session ended with a moment of silence for all who had been lost and found again, and for the sleeping giants who had chosen isolation over apotheosis. In the vast darkness of space, the barriers around human territory reformed stronger than ever, hiding whatever wonders and terrors lay within, and the galaxy, humbled and grateful, turned its attention to healing and growth, knowing that somewhere in the hidden depths of space, humanity continued its incomprehensible evolution, waiting for the day when the rest of existence might be ready to join them in whatever they were becoming.